One of the things I've learned both personally and professionally is that most of us don't choose our coping strategies because they're healthy. We choose them because at some point they helped us survive. This is what I often call creative adjustments. Whether it's alcohol, overworking, perfectionism, people pleasing, food, or simply staying busy enough that we don't have to feel what's underneath, our coping strategies almost always begin as an attempt to protect us. The question isn't what's wrong with me. The question is, what pain have I been trying not to feel? Today's conversation with Colleen Clifford is a powerful reminder of that truth. After losing her husband to alcohol related suicide, Colleen found herself navigating unimaginable grief while also confronting her own relationship with alcohol, survival, and what it truly means to heal. What surprised me most about this conversation wasn't the discussion about addiction. It was realizing how often we mistake coping for healing and how gently life invites us to slow down long enough to discover the difference. As you listen today, I invite you to hold this question. What coping strategy in my own life might be asking to be understood rather than judged? Let's dive in. Welcome to the Spiritually Curious Therapist, where science, spirit, and the self come together in the art of healing. I'm Jody Silverman, psychotherapist, Reiki master, and fellow seeker. Here we explore how presence, compassion, and nervous system wisdom helps us reconnect with the heart, the body, and the soul. Welcome back to the Spiritually Curious Therapist. Today we have with us a very special guest, Colleen Clifford. Colleen is an author, a health coach, and speaker who helps audiences understand cravings, grief, and the hidden survival patterns many carry quietly. I love that. A former binge drinker and a longtime commercial fisherwoman. I want to hear more about that. She spent decades, yeah, in high-risk environments that rewarded toughness and ignored emotional pain. After losing her husband to alcohol-related suicide, Colleen began asking different questions about healing, choice, and resilience. Today, she speaks to shame-free change and rebuilding trust with yourself after loss. Colleen is the author of the soon-to-be published book, Life Beyond the Binge, A Commercial Fisherwoman's Journey Home. This book offers her powerful, deeply human exploration of what lies beneath our coping habits, blending raw personal story with practical insights to show that true freedom isn't found in escape, but in learning how to come home to yourself. Welcome, Colleen.
Thank you, Jody, for having me. I value
Yeah.
your time and you said yes. Yay!
Yay! I'm really excited for this conversation. I think there's so much to learn from you and your experiences. So maybe we can just start there. Tell us a little bit about who Colleen is.
With that question, we always like to answer with what we do for a living, right? You already know I'm a you already know all that. You just heard, the audience just heard all that. But I think inside, I'd like to explain who I am as a compassionate, generous, empathetic person who has had some experiences in life that just really didn't have the tools to cope with. And the saying goes, I did the best I could with the tools I had. But as I've aged in life, and sometimes things happen to us through someone we love, like my late husband dying by alcohol related suicide. Now, I didn't die, but his death certainly rocked my world in every way imaginable. I'm just a person who's really trying to figure out life and how, through my experiences, I can offer some hope to someone else that maybe needs a helping hand at the moment.
Yeah, and I'm wondering, even as you're saying this, having gone through the death of a spouse is hard enough, but having gone through the death of a spouse by suicide
Mhm.
is extremely difficult. What was that like for you? Can you tell us a little bit about that experience?
I think you're absolutely right in that question. So that was 14 years ago, and Rest in peace, Scott. Just like to acknowledge that tragedy. It's, I can only, I only know my experience, and let's just say I was shocked to the core. If I don't think it's anything, I don't know about others' experiences, but it's nothing I ever imagined. It was not even in my periphery, right? Maybe it's something akin to somebody dying by a murder or getting in a car accident. You end the day, you don't think that's how the day's going to end. Not with the death, but just the death. So it was extremely shocking. I believe I had post-traumatic stress disorder, which I didn't realize at the time, but I think looking back now, I had the signs and symptoms of that. And I was on the boat when it happened. And so I was working, and what that means is I commercially fish, and I'm still doing that part-time, but we work contractually, so we sign our contract. Like I'm signing mine for Friday and May 7th, and I'll come home in July. So I live and work on the boat. At the time he died, I was out in the middle of, by Russia. We were fishing near Russia border, way north, very far. Another clincher is I had asked for a divorce that morning. And then we get to add that layer
Yeah.
of he died by suicide that evening. So yeah, it was just fortunately I was working with a therapist, and thank God for therapists. So thank you, Jody. We yeah, we had been going to therapy off the boat because we were having problems maritally, and he quit the therapy, and I asked her if I could continue while I was on the boat because I believed in that. I believed in the help that she was providing. And I'm like, okay, we're not doing it as a couple, but I'm going to continue. And so, fortunately, at the moment that this happened, I called her and she answered and she gave me some tools to get through that
Yeah.
moment. So, thank God for her, honestly.
I can't imagine what that must have been like to be out on a boat and to get this news. And oftentimes, when someone passes, and especially when someone passes by suicide, there's this incredible sense of helplessness. And to be out on a boat and not be at least in my mind, not be like tethered to something. And I don't know, you being a commercial fisher person, you're out on a boat quite often, so that might have been your tether. But I'm just wondering what that was like. Did you have community around? Did you have people?
No, I was told not to say anything because fishing was horrible and the captain didn't want people to know that I was going to be getting off the boat because he didn't want a mass exodus of people saying their back hurt, their uncle died, whatever. So I worked for probably 3 or 4 days. I showed up for work. My prep cook basically took over because I was useless. She knew, but and then a couple of the upper management knew, but no, I couldn't tell anyone until the moment production stopped and everyone's what's going on, and they get the skiff loaded up and I get in the skiff and everyone's what's happening, and so nobody had a chance to join me in the exit.
Oh,
Yeah,
wow. Yeah. So
yeah.
even as you're sharing that with me in this moment, what are you noticing?
I still notice a constriction about that
Yeah.
and some anger to the captain at the time who just it was pretty heartless, I feel. Fortunately, we have two captains. We have a first mate actually. It's the captain and then the first mate. And the first mate fishes at night. And Scott actually died. Found out he died in the evening. So I went to the wheelhouse and it was the first mate on shift. And I was crying, and he had lost a wife to cancer a few years prior. And so he was furious that Scott, the other captain, would not take me in. Their fishing was horrible anyways. He's, what are you waiting for? And so the night captain actually turned the boat around and got me off of it. So I might have been on it longer had he not just made his own decision and took took matters in his own hands, which I thank him for that.
Yeah. So this really makes me think about how, as a society, we deal with death in general. And
Hmm.
do you have any thoughts around that? Just given your experience, though, you, your captain didn't seem to have any empathy for what you might be going through. He was more concerned with what the other people on the how the other people on the boat might react, and therefore really isolated you at a really difficult time. And so I'm just curious about how you think about, well, how we as a society talk about and deal with death, especially death by suicide.
Yeah. I feel like until something happens, I know from my own experience now that I've experienced this, I'm much more compassionate to other people's stories. I think knowing this particular man and the way he is, that's just the space he was in at the time. I still work with him, and over the years, he's changed, and I've actually forgiven him. We've actually had some healthy conversations. So I think at that time he was young. He was he's very driven with his job and he's very good at what he does, but I think he just had no emotional capacity. He's just not an emotional guy and he's not all around generally. He's more emotional now than I've ever seen him, and that's not very emotional. So I think everyone's just different. And now that I realize that, it's easier to, instead of being angry, just go, okay, it is what it is. And quite honestly, at the end of the day, the fact that I didn't get home for about a week, because even once I got off the boat onto the island of St. Paul, which is this really tiny island north, there's the flights only fly 3 times a week. And on one of those days, the weather could be horrible, so maybe the flights get canceled. So it was just a miracle I got home finally. But and once I did it, being stuck in a place where I was able to make phone calls and arrangements before I stepped foot at home, it actually turned out to be really helpful to not just go into the chaos.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. A little bit of transition time and an opportunity to do your own processing. I know one of the things that you are very passionate about now is just getting the word out, psychoeducation, advocacy around alcohol-related deaths, alcohol-related suicide in particular. Can you say a little bit more about that and the work that you've been doing?
Yeah, thanks, Jody. Through my whole morphosis as a human being, I made a promise to Scott. I thought, okay, this tragedy, something has to come out of it. And so what's happening is just I've decided, okay, share. And now that we have podcasts, I'm having, when podcasters say yes to me, I have the opportunity to talk about mental health, suicide, alcohol, binge drinking. And so if someone can hear it, great, and maybe glean something from it that's helpful, that's what I'm all about right now. I still commercially fish, as I mentioned, and so this isn't a business at this point. It's a passion project, and I've written a book that will be published in July, which will really be like my platform to speak from. I'm working with someone to develop my speaking style, and that's a whole nother profession that I have no clue about, but I'm dipping my toe into it, and I'd love to get on stage and be
Yeah.
some kind of advocate for mental health and talk about suicide. And I don't think it's still such a taboo topic. People get really uncomfortable when the word suicide comes up. And what's interesting is that whenever I have had an opportunity, like at a grief retreat, to talk about suicide, people off to the side, when the talk is over, they'll come up to me and talk about their own suicide attempts or their brother that died by suicide. So it's just like people seem like they want an outlet to speak about it, but I don't know if there's a lot of outlets out there. Honestly, I haven't done a Google search to see if there's any outlets, but I don't know of any.
Yeah, I think it's definitely still difficult for people to talk about. I think it's gotten a little bit easier, probably because of people like you who go out on stage and advocacy and with social media and helplines. And I know you wanted to talk a little bit about the 988 helpline as a resource for folks, which is really important as well. Can you say a little bit more about the 988 helpline?
Yeah, it is a resource, and it's you can text or call it anytime, 24/7, 365 days a year, and there's a trained counselor there to answer. It's free, and they're there to listen, and it could save your life. I know it has saved lives.
Mhm.
And so please, if you're in a moment of despair, please don't hesitate and just give it a try.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember. Have you heard of Kevin Hines? Does that name sound familiar?
An actor?
He was a gentleman who jumped off the Bay Bridge in San
Oh,
Francisco
wow.
and survived. And after that, he started doing a lot of advocacy, and he's got some I think he's got a YouTube channel, and he was very big in mental health first aid, which is a training. People can get trained in mental health first aid as it's like regular first aid, but for mental health. So they
Mm,
train people in like how to look for warning signs, and if someone is suicidal, what are some things that you can do, and understanding different mental health diagnoses, things like that. I was trained in the youth mental health first aid many years ago, but his story was a part of that training. And what he
mm,
talked about, which was really fascinating, there were different parts of it, but what he says is as soon as my hands left the rail, basically, I knew I had made a mistake. And by some grace of God, he hit the water. And I forget, he says how far down he went, but a sea lion, I think it was a sea lion, brought him back up to the surface. And that's how he survived. So it's really a very powerful story, but he has also dedicated his life to suicide awareness and the importance of asking the question, that being one big piece of the puzzle because people are scared to ask. There is a belief that if you ask the question, you're putting the thought into someone's head, which we know is absolutely not true. And
mhm,
also that it's not something to be afraid of. And I think that's really important. It's scary, yes, but to have those conversations are really important. And so the
mhm.
more people can be out on the platforms, on stage, talking about it, bringing awareness, normalizing the conversations, the better we are, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. I am going to check him out. That sounds like I know you're the spiritual therapist. Really, oh my God, an act of,
Yeah, divine intervention.
yeah, especially with the sea lion saving him. What the heck? I, to kind of add to that, on the flip side of that, I guess I should say, I truly believe with what I know about binge drinking and alcohol, depression, and what can happen when you're combining alcohol with depression. I truly believe had Scott, and this gives me peace, whether it's true or not, it still gives me peace. I like to believe that had he made it through the night without being completely drunk, with his sadness or anger at me or whatever, that we could have had a conversation the next day.
Yeah.
And I think the alcohol pushed him over the ledge. So that's the sad part, one of the many sad parts of it for me and for him and for anyone who's using substances as a way of coping for depression or anxiety. It's just like adding fuel to your fire. And it's this is why I'm here to help hopefully somebody out there hear the message that it's a terrible combination. And as you said, I forget the statistics, but typically men succeed at suicide when they attempt it. Their numbers are very high. Women are not so successful, maybe because they really are asking for help. And so it's the whole like my late husband not being able to ask for help, which is also a sad component to it. And then this other component to it is that I believe it can happen to anyone,
Mhm.
depression, with the right circumstances. Like I watched him, I didn't marry a depressed man. Life happened, both his parents died right pretty close to each other. And we were very close to his parents. He fell into depression. He stopped working. He started drinking. I just kind of spiraled down, started taking medication, but then dropped that cold turkey, which is a bad thing to do. And I didn't really know the warning signs, right? So taking that mental health first aid would be a great tool to know and to have, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I have a question for you, and it's a sensitive one, so let me know if it feels like too much. But as I'm listening to you, I'm imagining there might be people out there who are wondering whether, given the circumstances and given that it was the day that you had asked for a divorce, and clearly he wasn't able to handle that and turned to alcohol and his depression got the better of him. But given that, did you experience any feelings of responsibility when you heard what had happened?
Yes.
Yeah, what was that
Yes.
like for you? Yeah.
Oh, I felt horrible. I, the reason I delayed asking for the divorce was we're taught not to hurt people's feelings. I wanted out of our relationship. I just didn't know how to ask for it. I didn't want to hurt his feelings. And that's where my going through my therapy, basically it was just helping me get to a point where I could ask for what I needed. But so emotionally I felt that way. Rationally, I knew it was not my fault. And actually the policeman who called me, so what happened is he died. I got an email from him at the end of my workday, which was 8:30 at night, implying that he would be dead by the time I read it. And so I had to read it again and go, what? What? And I ran to our one phone we had on the boat that I could use, and I called his son who lived in our guest house. And so he found him. Long story short, the I sat there in that room just crying and hysterical, and then the phone rang, and it was the police calling me. And he immediately said, "Ma'am, just want you to know it's not your fault." That's what everyone says, right? But to hear it from him was helpful. And he also said he said in these instances, it's probably a good thing you weren't home. And so I was like, wow, okay. So I didn't see for me, traumatically, I didn't see where he died, his poor son that found him, right? So I was spared all that trauma, thank God, or thank the universe. And I have people I admire, I professionally, I love that say it's not your fault, it's not your fault. And I knew that rationally, but it took me a long time to forgive myself, even though I really had nothing to forgive. Someone in my family I truly admire, sent me a beautiful message not too immediately after he died and said, the fact that he died by suicide just shows you how mentally unhealthy he was.
Yeah.
And it's not your fault. To ask to leave the relationship, you were doing the best thing for you. And so all those little pieces helped me.
Yeah. And I think that's so important because so many people feel trapped in relationships with people who are suffering from mental health challenges, depression, anxiety, and maybe even threatening to die by suicide in order to control the other person. And so many people end up staying because of their fear that they will cause the other person to take some kind of action. And what I'm hearing you say is that as difficult as that was, and you knew what you had to do for yourself.
I didn't know that morning that he would die by suicide, right? But even asking for the divorce was really difficult. And I had to ask my therapist, am I copying out by asking via email? Do I have to be in front of him to say I want a divorce? But the thing is, we had been implying a divorce up to that point anyway.
Yeah.
It wasn't like a total shock because we were going to marriage counseling. So obviously we were having problems.
Yeah. So, okay, so given all of that, I'm wondering if we can
Hmm.
just pivot a little bit and talk about you because, and I'm curious if it was through that process that you realized that you also had a binge drinking challenge, or were you aware of that beforehand? Like, where did that piece fall?
Yes, this is interesting. So at the time he died, I wasn't drinking. I had stopped for 3 years because I knew I had a problem binge
Okay.
drinking. I've been a binge drinker since I started drinking when I was 19. And but I realized over the years that it within our society it's really easy to deny that a person could have a binge drinking problem because we call it partying, and if you're not using alcohol every day, there's lots of ways you can talk yourself out of it being a problem. And so that's what I did for years until the first time I quit. I had seen myself in a video, and I that was enough encouragement to say that's not who I want to be. So I kind of white knuckled it. I didn't join any programs or anything. I just said, that's it, I'm quitting. And fortunately, on the boat, we don't have alcohol, so I can do a detox thing, signing my contract. We used to call it the floating rehab. Most people would come back to work after having partied, and they would dry out for 4 or 5 months. So I wasn't drinking. And actually, after he died, I was this big advocate of alcohol is what killed him, and I'll never drink again, and those kinds of claims. And I was living that way until I started to fall into my own depression. After all the dust settled,
Yeah.
about a year and a half of all the, you take care of a lot of things when your spouse dies, and I had to move, and we had horses and dogs and just a lot of pieces, and I was still fishing. About a year and a half, when everything was kind of resolved, I just had me on my time off and nothing to do anymore to distract me. And I thought, F it, I'm just going to start drinking and smoking again. I don't care about life. What's the point? And
And
that's when I realized, yeah.
I was sorry, I was going to just pause you just for a moment to slow that down. What
Mhm.
do you think was going on for you in that moment or that moment in time?
Yeah, I think I had been ignoring my sadness and pain and staying busy. I didn't process any of my emotions around the trauma of his suicide and what that really meant for me. And I had a moment. It's funny, I was driving his truck and it broke down by Lake Shasta, and I ended up getting a week paid from the insurance company for the truck until it got fixed. So I was basically in Lake Shasta, beautiful place, on a vacation resting. And that's when I went to the store and bought a 6 pack and just was like, F it. I don't know. I really don't know. That's a good question, Jody. I'm not sure, but I do know that I was starting to get into my own depression.
Yeah. Well,
And
it's
yeah.
interesting that it was when you went to buy the six pack, it was at a time when it was like, oh, I've got nothing to do. Sometimes it's like we come out on the other side and it's like when everything settles, that's when things start to kick up. And those, and I know you wanted to talk about too, the cravings start to kick in. Like,
Mhm.
oh, I need something, right? It's like that dopamine, right? So I need something to keep me going or to, so why not alcohol? I don't know if that resonates with you at all, but that's what's coming up for me.
Yes, I think that is the best description. And I would imagine you probably see other instances with maybe some other clients, like a kind of like a normal pattern for people who have trauma and crazy stuff to keep you busy, and then all of a sudden you just have yourself and your feelings that you really haven't dealt with, and then oh, these feelings are uncomfortable. I'm going to drown them with what I like to drown what's my coping mechanism, and for me it was drinking
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
smoking. I was a smoker at the time too. So yeah, that's and then I realized, wow, this is depression. This doesn't feel good.
Mm,
And I didn't think about suicide, but I did get to a place where if I could have fallen in a dark hole and not come out, I would have welcomed that.
sure.
Getting out of bed was really hard.
Yeah. So it sounds like you went into a collapsed state.
Oh,
Yeah.
exactly what I did.
Yeah. And it makes sense in terms of all you had to do from the moment, and maybe even before, but from the moment you found out about your husband just being in that hypervigilant stay having to get home and all the things you had to put in place and make sure everything was taken care of. And then when that's all gone and you don't have to fight, you're not in that activated fight flight state anymore. The nervous system sometimes is just like, okay, I'm done. I just need to go hide for a little bit.
You hit the nail on the head.
Yeah.
That's, I would say that's exactly what happened.
Yeah. And so what did you do to start to come out of that?
I got a little bit lucky in the sense of my job requires I get out of bed and I can't call in sick. And I was working shipyard on the boat and I could call in sick, but I'd lose my job and that wasn't an option for me. So I had to show up for work. And I would wait until my shift started at 6 a.m. Fortunately, I just walked down the stairs to the galley, so it's not a big commute. But I would just get out of bed, throw a hat on my head, maybe brush my teeth later, and go to work. It's just me in the galley, so no one has to see me. Yeah, and once I started working, it's just movement is very helpful and therapeutic. And I had to think about my meal and just get through my day. And then after my shift, I would crawl back into bed. And then just over time, it just got better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit more what it's like being on the ship. Is there a lot of, I'm listening to you and I'm imagining you just for 8 hours just fishing. And like, I have no concept of what that's like. Can you tell us a little bit about what that's like?
Sure, I would love to. So it is actually a ship. I used to call it a boat, but it's 370 feet long and 4 stories high. We catch our fish with nets, a big net. And so a full net, a good net would be 190 tons. And then there's a whole system of it. We have a zipper at the back of the net. It drops into live tanks, and we have a factory underneath the trawl deck. And so there's about 90 people that work in the factory. And there's a galley department, which is the department I work in. And we feed people day and night. So my shift's a 12-hour shift, and then there's another shift. And we feed them constantly, like nonstop. And there's a wheelhouse department, there's a engine room department, there's a factory department. Let's see, am I missing anyone? A QC department, quality control. We have a medic on board. So it's basically like a operating little city.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking as you were describing that.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
what would a day in the life for you look like?
For me, it sounds like a lot working 12 hours, but you have 12 hours off. And literally, my alternate comes in. I work 8:30 to 8:30, and when he comes in, we say hi, and I tell him how the day went. It might take 5 minutes, and I go to my room, the cabin. And we have a gym on board, so I could work out if I want. But for me, typically at the end of the day, I'm pretty beat, so I just sit down for a few minutes, take a shower. I have a ukulele on board. I might play that a little bit. But most of my productive time for my own personal self is in the morning prior to work. I usually get up about 2 or 3 hours before work and I just have my little routine of sitting on the floor and I'd like to journal and I write. So I have all kinds of little things. I get a lot done when I'm on the boat, actually, personally, more than I do at home. It's hard to stay on routine at home.
Yeah, I imagine it is exactly. It's a routine. So when there's
Mm,
routine, it's much easier to get the things done you want to get done because there's a space for everything. There's like a spot
hmm
for everything. Yeah. Yeah, that's great.
exactly.
Good. So in your other life, you do health coaching. Is that, yeah, can you say
Yes.
a little bit more about that?
Yes, I have been. So in 2010, I got my health coaching certification with Institute of Integrative Nutrition. And being a chef at that time, a lot of people didn't know how to cook beans, or the internet wasn't really a big thing then. So I really wanted to have cooking classes and things like that. Fishing's always been a thorn in my side in the sense of I get something started and then I go back to work on the boat. So it's a little hard to have consistent clients. So fast forward, and then also in 2010, I wasn't ready to quit my job where I knew I would make income and then do coaching, which nobody knew what coaching was in 2010. But I had it in my back pocket and I would use it on people on the boat, whether they knew it or not, with what I'm feeding them and what have you, right? I was known as the healthy cook, and everyone would come to me for with questions, and so that was a lot of fun. But when I quit drinking 5 years ago, I got my alcohol-free health coaching certification, and once again, just dabble when I can. Right now, I'm going fishing, so taking on a client's not an option. Some of it's personal growth, but if I have an opportunity to work with someone, I love that, but it's not really until I quit fishing full time or until I retire from fishing, which will be in 3 years. This is just a part-time thing.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
and so your focus in doing the health coaching is both nutrition, health and wellness, but also around quitting drinking and managing cravings. Is that right?
Yes. Those are my niches.
Yeah.
The
Tell,
binge behavior and then cravings.
okay, so yeah, so tell us a little bit about what, so for the listeners, so that they can listen for this and both their clients and maybe even themselves and their family members and friends. What is a binge behavior?
Okay, for the drinking, it's defined by the CDC as four or more drinks for a woman, five or more for a male in one instant, in one episode or one occasion. And then you have to remember the drinks are the standard drinks. They're not like we might call this glass of wine a drink, but that's actually two drinks.
Mhm.
And it's very feasible. A lot of people do it without realizing they're binge drinking, right? A bottle of wine a night is actually considered a binge for anyone that's drinking a bottle of wine a night.
Yeah. And you often say that it only takes one instance of binge drinking to kill yourself. Tell us what that means.
Yes. Or to change your life forever. So, what that means, the point of my message is not to tell anyone they have to quit drinking. It's just to provide some caution that the binge drinking is something that can creep up on people, right? They maybe go to a party and they plan to only have two, but they end up getting drunk, maybe even forgetting how many drinks they had. And that's the moment when you can black out because your brain can only handle so much alcohol at once and it shuts down its memory center. You can black out but still be functioning. So you're moving through life, maybe stumbling, but you're moving through your drunken moment, not remembering anything you're doing. So in those kinds of instances, you might wake up not knowing how you got home, or you might wake up with someone you don't know, or those kinds of things. And those are moments when you go, wow. And you might think, oh, okay, that's not my character, and I'm not proud of that, but I don't do that all the time. And so I'll just really pay attention next time I drink. And that's the story I told myself for a lot of years. The problem is when you do something that could alter your life forever, like you get drunk, you you're water skiing and your foot gets chopped up by the engine because you got too close because you were drunk. Those kinds of things we hear about with
Yeah.
partying.
Or get
And that's
drive
yes,
home and
yes. Yeah, and actually with drunk driving, that's the last binge episode. I drove home intoxicated, and I
mm,
apologize to anyone listening who may have a family member or loved one affected by that, but that was the most shameful thing I've ever done, and I that became my why, my reason for change. And statistically, one in a person dies every 42 minutes in the United States from drunk driving still.
wow.
I just looked up that statistic because I'm writing my book and I
Mhm.
wanted to make sure it was correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's still happening. And I had someone on a podcast ask me, well, don't people know by now that how stupid that is? Like, how could you do that? Right? There's no, and the response to that is, of course, but when you're in your drunken state, you don't realize how drunk you are. And quite honestly, when I got in the car, alcohol I had been at a certain alcohol level, but it hit me harder like three-quarters of the way, right? So
Mhm.
three-quarters of the way, that's when I started seeing a double line. I didn't see it when I got in the car. And so not giving any excuses, but just trying to explain how those things can happen or
Yeah.
just poor judgment, right? We're
Yeah.
okay. I'm okay. I can drive.
Yeah. And I think you raise a really good point, which kind of goes along with all of this, which is like once, really after your first drink, if not before, you're not thinking straight. Your perception changes, your ability to make good decisions changes. And so the decision to get into a car or to do something that you might regret later, those chances get higher and higher the more that you drink.
Exactly. And so fascinating, really, when I'm looking back at it now, like what happens to our brain, like even blacking out, your brain, after the second drink, your brain starts dumping all these other neurotransmitters, and it gets a little bit complicated with all of that scientific stuff. But to simplify it, just saying that your brain shuts down the memory center, the hypothalamus, to keep the rest of your brain functioning. Because it's like, "Oh, I'm getting saturated with alcohol. And if you keep doing that, I'm just going to stop your heart, right? Our brain function, our whole body moves because of our brain.
Yeah.
And so it's just that's why our balance and it's interesting. One other thing, I'm going on a tangent, but the reason I quit the first time was because I saw myself in a video, drunk, stumbling, slurring. The thing that made me quit was that I thought I was okay when I was taking that video. The
Mhm.
next day I saw it, I thought I was okay so much that I sent it to someone thinking, oh, check out our party. And the next day I was horrified that I sent those videos because I was trashed. And I didn't know how trashed I was.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was crazy.
Yeah, it's really eye-opening. And I think you bring up a really good point, which is that we don't know what the effects in the moment. I've heard your story several times, and
Mhm.
especially in this day and age with iPhones, and it's so easy for people to snap pictures or take video when something comes back to you and you're like, oh, that is not how I remember it happening, or I don't even remember that happening at all.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah, it can be really scary. Yeah. So, Colleen, as we start to wind down, I'll ask you what I ask all my guests, which is there anything that we did not talk about that you would like for people to know?
I loved our conversation. Thank you. I would just like to leave your listeners maybe with a thought. So, if you do drink or do recreational drugs, I just like to ask the question, how is that working for you? And if you're having some curiosity around your behavior or some little flags, oops, maybe I need to stop this. Chances are that's a pretty good sign that maybe something does need to shift for you to be your most authentic self. Yeah, take
Yeah.
inventory.
I love that. And if people are interested in learning more about you and your book that's coming out, where's the best place to find that information?
On my website, which is lifebeyondthebinge.com.
Perfect. And I'll put that in the show notes so that people can easily access it.
Thank you.
Good. Well, thank you so much for being here today, Colleen. I really appreciate you and the advocacy that you're doing and the work that you're doing. And so sorry for all the sorrow that has brought you here, and also grateful that you are here doing this work.
Thank you so much, Jody, for having me. This was
You're
such,
welcome.
I feel like I did get my therapy session. Thank you.
You're welcome.